So I think first, it's really important to have these very long-term strategies and policies, and really because in the African context, we see a lot of changes in politics, right? It's not the stability that you see or the consistency that you see in other countries that might not, really apply to the African context. So when you have these long-term strategies and policies, and we've seen this in the work that we've been doing in many of the African cities, is that it helps sustain some of the efforts that you've started. So that's one, is really having these long-term strategies and policies that are based on the safe systems approach. So really taking into consideration what we discussed earlier with very realistic implementation plans, right? So it doesn't have to be targets that you can't meet or activities that you can't do, but really something that's feasible and something that can be done, and really create this accountability and transparency through these implementations plans. So really have the institutions report on this and report if they're meeting their targets. And really attached to this is the financing. So you cannot have these strategies and policies without having the internal financing, where you're diverting some of this. And a lot of African cities, or we hear this, is there isn't enough money. We see a lot of money going into infrastructure. And so just thinking about earmarking some of that to go to road safety, and not just building roads and maintaining roads, but really thinking about making sure that these roads are meeting the road safety standards. The second is that it can't be done alone, right? So it's very important to engage and collaborate with different stakeholders. And in African cities, we see this very participatory approach of decision making and planning is not as widespread as we'd like, but it's really important to include, the police, the public health institutions, civil society, researchers, the public, but even the road users themselves. So for example, when you're looking at improving safety around schools, it's really important to include the children. They know what the road safety issue is. We're very surprised sometimes where it doesn't take, an engineering degree sometimes to understand, not feeling safe. So it's just really engaging with them and understanding, so that when you do design the interventions, that you're actually making a difference to their life, right? And to their safety and to their comfort and convenience. The third is that there's huge potential. So we see that, 2/3 of Africa's infrastructure is still not built. So, there is a chance for Africa to get it right. Africa is exactly at this inflection point where the development of its urban areas can be planned in a way that you leapfrog and avoid mistakes. So really moving away from this car-centric model to this people-centric model, where you're really focusing on access and how people are moving around their cities to have access to education, to employment. They should be able to do that, but they should be able to do that in a safe, convenient, and an affordable way. So really to think about safety in regards to this. And one way that we've seen this is that all infrastructure investments, one way to do this is to have clear indicators. So one of them to be fatalities and serious injuries. So when you have these huge roads being constructed, or these large transport investment projects, that safety is a key indicator that you measure in terms of the success of the project, right? And if you will continue to invest in that. The second is, we do believe that every city is different, and there is a need for contextualized interventions. But our research and on the ground work, we found a few things that are very effective for improving road safety. And this is more around, so I've talked about the policy and investment, but these are more on the ground interventions that can be done. I think the first and most important one is is tackling speed. So it is a leading factor for fatalities and injuries in low and middle income countries. And I can't stress this enough, is that, when you reduce speeds, and we can, I won't go into too much detail, but to have safe speeds that are like 30 kilometers per hour, where you see a lot of interaction between vehicles and people, and 50 kilometers per hour to, where there are arterial roads or these cut through roads, that's very critical, because that's one cost-effective way of really tackling road safety. So it doesn't require a lot of investment. It doesn't require a lot of technology. You're really thinking about, one, setting speed limits, but really coupling this with self-enforcing physical interventions, right? So it's not enough just to say, oh, this road, we're going to have 30 kilometers per hour, but to really think about the interventions that you put on the ground, whether it's speed humps, rumble strips, there's a whole lot of, variety of interventions that can be done. And that means that, in African cities, we hear this a lot as, why do you need the physical intervention? And that's because we don't have a lot of resources for enforcement. We don't have this fancy speed cameras, and we don't have time until, we adopt these technologies. So in the future, that could be something that's possible. But for now, the speed management really needs to take into consideration these physical interventions and still have enforcement, at the capacity that's available, really build the awareness and education and have that evaluation. So really a holistic approach to speed management. The second is, car-free day. We've been working a lot on this, and we've seen that it's actually a very low cost, very effective tool for building awareness on the importance of road safety, but it allows the public to imagine and envision what their cities could look like. Where you can go out on the street and you can walk and feel safe and play, and you immediately see what the impact of a vehicle's presence has for pedestrians, right? So we've seen in Addis, the Car Free Day initiative really take off, and it's helped. It's sort of a tool to influence policy and investment, because the decision makers are able to see what cities look like, but how happy the public is. So they rally behind these sort of interventions, and then you can work, collect more data, understand the situation, and then implement most of these road safety and walking and cycling infrastructure and facilities that are needed. But it's a really good way to build ownership and build awareness. And finally, just to say that, sometimes it is a huge risk, and when you're bringing new ideas, it can feel very overwhelming and difficult. But so one way to get around this is really thinking about these tactical urbanism or interim interventions that are looking at, you don't have to change something permanently first. So you can use very temporary solutions, like where we're seeing a lot of, paint and different sort of materials that can be used to transform parts of the city, to show how, to demonstrate that it's safer this way, that people would enjoy it more. And then over the course of that temporary period, collect the data and the information needed to convince decision makers that this should be a permanent intervention, right? So there's really interesting tools and methods that different cities are using that could really be applied.